What I'm about to share with you will shatter everything you thought you understood about reality, about the cosmos, about the very nature of your existence. This is not a story for the faint of heart. This is not entertainment. This is a forbidden truth that powerful forces have worked tirelessly to bury. A revelation so profound that it threatens the foundation of every institution you've been taught to trust. The origin of Comet 3I Atlas is not what they told you. NASA knows this. The world's governments know this. And now you're about to know it too. My name is Dr. Lucas Mitchell, and until 5 years ago I was a respected professor of astrophysics at Portland State University. I had a beautiful wife named Sarah, a 7-year-old son named Jacob, and a career that promised everything a man could want. But life, as I would come to understand, has a way of dismantling our carefully constructed illusions to prepare us for something far greater and infinitely more terrifying than we could ever imagine. The accident happened on a rainy November evening in 2019. Sarah was driving Jacob home from his piano lesson when a semi-truck ran a red light on Interstate 84. They said death was instantaneous. They said they felt no pain. But I felt everything. Every molecule of my being shattered that night, scattered across a universe that suddenly felt cold, indifferent, and utterly meaningless. In the months that followed, something began happening to my body. It started with fatigue so profound that climbing a single flight of stairs left me gasping. Then came the joint pain, the inflammation, the mysterious fevers that no doctor could explain. They ran every test imaginable. Lupus, they said at first, then rheumatoid arthritis, then fibromyalgia. Eventually they settled on undifferentiated autoimmune disorder, which is medical terminology for we have absolutely no idea what's destroying you from the inside out. I took a leave of absence from the university. I withdrew from colleagues, from friends, from anyone who might remind me of the man I used to be. I sold our family home in the suburbs and bought a small, isolated property in the hills outside Bend, Oregon, where the high desert meets the Cascade Range. The house was modest, barely more than a cabin, really, but it had something I desperately needed. A view of the night sky unobstructed by city lights, a portal to the only place where I still felt something resembling peace. Astronomy had been my first love, long before Sarah, before Jacob, before the career and the accolades and the illusion of control. As a boy growing up in rural Montana, I would lie in the grass for hours, watching the stars wheel overhead, feeling simultaneously insignificant and connected to something vast and eternal. Now, broken and alone, I returned to that childhood refuge. I installed a decent telescope on my back deck, nothing fancy, an 8-inch Dobsonian reflector, and spent my nights cataloging celestial objects, losing myself in the cold mathematics of orbital mechanics and red-shifted light. My neighbors thought I was crazy. The eccentric hermit professor who muttered to himself and never came down from his mountain except to buy groceries and pick up medication. They weren't entirely wrong. I was barely holding on, suspended between the desperate desire to follow Sarah and Jacob into whatever comes after death, and some stubborn, inexplicable instinct that kept me breathing, kept me watching the stars, kept me waiting for something I couldn't name. By November 2024, 5 years after the accident, I had become a ghost haunting my own life. The autoimmune symptoms had worsened despite every treatment. My doctor suggested it might be psychosomatic, that perhaps my grief was literally consuming me from the inside. I didn't disagree. Some mornings I woke up and forgot, just for a moment, that they were gone. Then reality would crash down, and the day ahead would stretch out like a prison sentence I had no choice but to serve. That's when the news about Comet 3 I Atlas began circulating through the amateur astronomy community. It was the second confirmed interstellar object to pass through our solar system, following Oumuamua in 2017. But unlike Oumuamua, which had sparked wild speculation about alien spacecraft before scientists settled on calling it a peculiar asteroid, Atlas exhibited characteristics that defied easy explanation. Its trajectory was unusual. Its composition seemed to shift depending on what instruments were observing it. And most disturbing, NASA and the ESA were being unusually secretive about their findings. I became obsessed. Here, finally, was a mystery that pulled me out of my spiral of grief, something that demanded my full attention. I spent hours researching everything I could find about Atlas, cross-referencing official reports with leaked data from insider forums. The patterns were there if you knew where to look. Inconsistencies in the spectroscopic analysis, gaps in the published observation schedule, government agencies suddenly interested in what should have been a routine astronomical event. On the night of November 15th, 2024, I was tracking Atlas through my telescope. It was scheduled to make its closest approach to Earth, still millions of miles away, but visible with decent equipment. The sky was crystalline, the kind of perfect clarity you only get in the high desert when the air is cold and dry. I had my notes spread out beside me, my camera attached to the telescope, prepared to document anything unusual. At 11:47 p.m., something changed. The temperature dropped so suddenly that my breath became visible in clouds of vapor. The air itself seemed to thicken, to become charged with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. My telescope's tracking motor began making a strange whining sound, and the image in the eyepiece started to distort, rippling like water. Then the light came. It wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from behind my house, spilling over the roof and flooding my deck with an intensity that should have been blinding, but somehow wasn't. The color was unlike anything in my experience as a physicist, a blue so deep and pure, it seemed to contain every shade between cobalt and sapphire, yet also somehow beyond the visible spectrum, as if my eyes were perceiving wavelengths they weren't designed to see. I stumbled backward, knocking over my telescope, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to run inside, to lock the doors, to call someone. But my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen, transfixed by a terror so primal it bypassed thought entirely. The light intensified, and I heard or felt a sound. It wasn't audible in the traditional sense. It was a vibration that resonated in my bones, in my teeth, in the cavity of my chest, a frequency that seemed to reach directly into the core of my being and pluck at something I didn't know existed. I forced my legs to move, rounding the corner of the house toward the source of the light. What I saw there, hovering silently 3 feet above my overgrown backyard, defied the entire framework of physics I had spent my life studying. It was a craft. There was no other word for it. Diamond-shaped, approximately 20 feet across at its widest point, its surface appeared to be made of a material that was simultaneously solid and fluid, like liquid mercury frozen in geometric perfection. The blue light emanated from within it, pulsing with a rhythm that somehow matched my own heartbeat. There was no sound of engines, no heat distortion, no visible means of propulsion. It simply existed, hanging there in violation of everything I understood about gravity and aerodynamics. As I stood there, my mind fracturing under the weight of impossibility, a section of the craft's surface rippled and dissolved, creating an opening. The light from within intensified, and a figure emerged. I want to tell you that I remained calm, that my scientific training allowed me to observe objectively. I would be lying. I collapsed to my knees, my damaged immune system flooding my body with inflammatory chemicals, my vision tunneling, my heart racing so fast I thought it might burst. The being that stood before me was roughly my height, perhaps 5'11", but there the resemblance to humanity ended. Its skin, if you could call it skin, had the appearance of polished black stone, obsidian, or onyx, but with an inner luminescence that suggested it was something far more complex. The surface seemed to shift subtly in the light, revealing geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than my eyes could process. But it was the eyes that broke me. Where human eyes are horizontal ovals, this being's eyes were vertical golden slits that glowed with an internal light, pupils that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of molten amber. They were ancient beyond measure, compassionate beyond understanding, and when they focused on me, I felt utterly transparent, as if every secret, every shame, every hidden corner of my soul was laid bare. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My throat had closed with fear and awe, and something else I couldn't name a recognition, perhaps as if some buried part of me had been waiting for this moment my entire life. Then it spoke, not with words, not with sound. The communication bypassed language entirely, arriving in my mind as pure understanding, accompanied by cascading images and emotions that threatened to overwhelm my sanity. Later, I would realize it was using my pineal gland as a receiver, activating dormant neural pathways that most humans never access. "Lucas Mitchell," the presence said, and hearing my own name spoken directly into my consciousness nearly shattered what remained of my composure. "I am Xylos, emissary of the Interdimensional Federation of Kellen. You have been chosen not by chance, but by the frequency of your suffering. Your pain has created a signal that resonates across dimensions, and I have come to offer you a truth that will either heal you or destroy you completely. The choice will be yours." I found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What are you?" The being Xylos tilted its head in a gesture that was eerily human despite the alien form. "I am what you might call a consciousness navigator, a traveler between the layers of reality that your species is only beginning to perceive. I exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional frequencies, and I have been watching your world for what you would measure as thousands of years." "Why?" I managed. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you are dying, Lucas Mitchell. Not from the autoimmune disease your doctors cannot cure. You are dying from unprocessed trauma that has become embedded in your cellular structure. Your grief has created an energetic frequency that is consuming you from within, and unless you understand what truly happened to your wife and son, unless you accept the truth about the nature of consciousness and death, you will not survive another year." The words hit me like physical blows. I thought I had cried out all my tears years ago, but fresh ones came now, hot and burning. "You don't know anything about them. You can't possibly." Sarah Rebecca Mitchell, born June 14th, 1979. Jacob Thomas Mitchell, born March 3rd, 2012. They were your entire world. And when they were taken from you on November 8th, 2019, a part of your soul was severed. But Lucas, what if I told you that their deaths were not the random tragedy you were led to believe? I was on my feet before I realized I was moving, rage replacing fear. Don't you dare use them to—" "They were targeted," Xylos continued, the telepathic voice remaining calm but insistent. "Not by humans. by entities that exist in the spaces between your reality, beings that feed on the frequency of trauma and grief. Your wife and son were not killed by a truck driver's negligence. They were harvested for the energy their sudden deaths would produce in them and in you. The world tilted. I felt my knees start to buckle again, but this time Xylos reached out with a hand that had too many joints, too many fingers, and steadied me. The touch sent a wave of warmth through my body, pushing back the inflammation, the pain, the fog of despair that had been my constant companion for 5 years. "Show me," I whispered. "If what you're saying is true, show me." Xylos's vertical pupils expanded, and suddenly I was no longer standing in my backyard. I was inside a memory not mine, but one shared directly into my consciousness with perfect clarity. I saw Sarah's car, saw Jacob in his booster seat, singing along to the radio, saw my wife glancing in the rearview mirror and smiling at our son with infinite love. Then I saw what the police reports never mentioned, a shimmer in the air beside the highway, a distortion like heat waves, and within that distortion, shapes, things without solid form, beings of shadow and hunger that existed just outside normal human perception. I watched as they reached into our reality, invisible hands guiding the semi-truck driver's attention away from the road at the precise moment his vehicle would cross paths with my family. I watched as the impact occurred, as the metal crumpled and glass shattered. And then, and this is what broke me completely, I watched as these shadow entities descended on the crash site and fed, drawing in the waves of shock and terror, an agony that poured from the dying and the witnesses like some obscene harvest. The vision released me, and I was back in my body, vomiting in the dirt while Xylos stood by, and what I somehow knew was sympathy. When I could finally breathe again, I looked up at this impossible being with eyes that must have been wild with grief and fury. "Why?" I choked out. "Why would anything do that? What could possibly justify?" "Justification is a human concept," Xylos replied. "These entities are not evil in the way you understand evil. They are more like parasites, existing in a frequency where intense negative emotion is literally food. They have fed on humanity for millennia, cultivating suffering the way you might tend crops. Your religions call them demons. Your psychologists call them intrusive thoughts. Your scientists don't call them anything because they refuse to acknowledge that consciousness exists beyond the purely material. But you're telling me now," I said, my voice hardening. "Why? What's the point of this revelation if not to torture me further with knowledge I can do nothing about? Because you are not powerless, Lucas, and because what I'm about to reveal to you connects directly to why you've been tracking Comet 3 I Atlas. The two truths are inseparable." I pulled myself to my feet, using the side of my house for support. My body still ached, but the touch from Xylos had provided a temporary relief, a glimpse of what freedom from pain might feel like. "Tell me about Atlas." The being's golden eyes seemed to shine brighter. "Comet 3I Atlas is not a comet. It is not even a natural celestial body, though it has been drifting through space for longer than your civilization has existed. It is a fragment of organic technology, a seed, if you will, left by an ancient race that your myths remember as the architects or the progenitors. Organic technology? That's impossible. Our instruments would. Your instruments detect exactly what it wants them to detect," Xylos interrupted. "The object you call Atlas is semi-conscious, capable of altering its molecular structure and energy signature to appear as whatever would draw the least suspicion. It is, in essence, a repository, a cosmic hard drive containing the source code of human consciousness, proof of your species' true origin, and instructions for the next phase of your evolution. I shook my head, trying to process information that seemed designed to exceed my capacity for comprehension. You're saying humans were ... created? Designed? Modified, Xylos corrected. Your species evolved naturally up to a certain point, but approximately 200,000 years ago, genetic architects intervened. They seeded your DNA with latent capabilities, frequencies that would allow you to eventually perceive and interact with other dimensions. They gave you consciousness that extends beyond the purely physical. They made you, in essence, antennas capable of receiving transmissions from across the cosmic network of awareness. But why? Why would anyone? Because consciousness is the fundamental force of the universe, Lucas. It is not emergent from matter. Matter is emergent from consciousness. And beings of sufficient advancement understand that every conscious entity is a node in an infinite network, contributing to the evolution of existence itself. Your species was seeded with potential because the architects saw in early humans a unique combination of emotional depth, creative capacity, and adaptability that could, if properly developed, contribute something unprecedented to the cosmic symphony. I laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. Then they failed. Look at us. We're destroying our planet. We're at each other's throats. You are in your infancy, Xylos said gently, a species experiencing growing pain. But Lucas, the reason I am here, the reason Atlas has returned to your solar system at this precise moment in your history, is because you are approaching a critical threshold. Within the next few decades, humanity will either tear itself apart in a final paroxysm of greed and fear, or you will undergo a collective awakening that will change everything. And NASA knows about Atlas? The governments? They know enough to be terrified, Xylos confirmed. When Oumuamua passed through your solar system in 2017, it was a scout, analyzing whether humanity was ready for contact. The data it sent back was ... mixed. So now Atlas has come, carrying a message that certain factions within your power structures absolutely do not want humanity to receive. What message? That you are not alone, that you never have been, that the religions you have built, while containing grains of truth, have been deliberately distorted to keep you controllable, that the teachers you call Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, and others were hybrid beings, part human, part higher dimensional, sent to activate the dormant frequencies in human DNA, that the suffering you experience is not divine punishment or karmic debt, but a frequency that can be transmuted once you understand its true nature. I felt something shift inside me, a tectonic movement of belief and worldview. The disease, I whispered. My autoimmune disorder. You said it was connected to my trauma. Your body is not failing randomly, Xylos said. It is responding to the energetic frequency of unresolved grief. Every thought you have carries a vibrational signature. The thoughts you've been thinking, the guilt, the anger, the desperate wish that you had died instead of them. These create a frequency that your immune system interprets as a threat. It attacks your own tissues because on an energetic level, you have been attacking yourself. Can it be healed? It can be transformed. But Lucas, healing at this level requires you to accept truths that will shatter your current understanding of reality. It requires you to forgive yourself for being human, for surviving when they didn't. It requires you to understand that Sarah and Jacob are not gone in the way you believe. Consciousness cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. Over the following hours, Xylos shared knowledge that rewired my understanding of existence itself. We sat together in my backyard as the night deepened, and the being transmitted information through a combination of telepathy, holographic images that appeared in the air between us, and direct downloads of understanding that bypassed language entirely. I learned that the universe is not the dead, mechanical clockwork that modern science portrays, but a living, conscious entity experiencing itself through infinite forms. I learned that time is not linear but simultaneous, that every possible version of every moment exists eternally in what Xylos called the eternal now. I learned that death is simply a shift in frequency, that Sarah and Jacob still existed, still loved me, still watched over me from a dimensional layer I couldn't perceive with my physical senses. But the most devastating revelation came when Xylos showed me the truth about Atlas and why it had been hidden. Inside the comet that was not a comet was encoded proof that human religions had been systematically infiltrated and corrupted by forces that benefited from keeping humanity spiritually confused and energetically enslaved. The original teachings of beings like Jesus had been about activating the divine frequency within each person, about understanding that the kingdom of heaven was not a place, but a state of consciousness. But these teachings were dangerous to structures of power and control. The entities that fed on your family's death, Xylos explained, are just one species in an ecology of consciousness. There are beings that feed on fear, on anger, on division, and there are human institutions that, whether knowingly or unknowingly, serve these beings by keeping your species in a state of perpetual conflict and suffering. The revelation of Atlas would expose this system. It would show humanity that you've been lied to about your origins, your nature, and your potential. The people in power cannot allow that, but you're allowing it, I said. You're telling me. Because you are dying anyway, Lucas, and because your frequency, if properly attuned, could become a beacon. The awakening that is coming will not happen through mass media or government disclosure. It will happen person by person, as individuals like you remember who and what you truly are, and begin vibrating at a frequency that activates the dormant codes in others. I don't know how to do that. I'm barely holding myself together. Then we begin with healing, not your body that will follow. We begin with healing the frequency of your grief. What happened next, I can barely put into words. Xylos placed both hands on either side of my head, those strange multi-jointed fingers, gentle, despite their alien form. The being's vertical pupils dilated until the golden light seemed to consume its entire face, and then that light poured into me. I experienced what I can only describe as a cosmic regression therapy. Xylos guided my consciousness backward, not through time in a linear sense, but through the layers of trauma encoded in my cells. I saw myself at the funeral, hollow-eyed and empty. I saw myself in the hospital, learning they were gone. I saw myself in the police station, identifying their belongings. Each memory was excruciating, but Xylos kept me anchored, kept me from drowning. Then we went deeper, past this lifetime. I saw flashes of what Xylos called frequency echoes, other lives, other forms, an eternal progression of consciousness learning and growing through countless experiences. I saw that I had died before, many times, in many ways. I saw that death was not an ending, but a transition, as natural as waking from sleep. And then, most impossibly, I felt them, Sarah and Jacob, not as memories, not as ghosts, but as living presences existing in a frequency just beyond my normal perception. They were not suffering. They were not lost. They were whole and radiant and filled with a love that transcended anything possible in physical form. They watch over you, Xylos whispered into my consciousness. They never left. You simply forgot how to perceive them because your grief drowned out their frequency. But Lucas, they want you to live. They want you to heal. They want you to complete what you came here to do. What did I come here to do? To be a guardian of truth, to hold the frequency of awakening for others who are ready, to refuse to forget what you've learned here tonight, even when every force in your reality tries to make you doubt, to make you dismiss this as delusion or break down. As Xylos withdrew the connection, I felt different. The chronic pain that had been my constant companion for 5 years had diminished to a distant echo. My mind, which had been foggy and slow for so long, felt crystalline and clear. But more than the physical changes, something had shifted in my fundamental being. The guilt that had been eating me alive had transformed into something else, not happiness, exactly, but acceptance, compassion, a recognition that I had done nothing wrong, that I was not being punished, that I was simply a consciousness having a human experience, learning the lessons that only suffering can teach. What happens now? I asked as Elos moved back toward the craft. Now you choose, the being replied. You can dismiss this experience as a hallucination brought on by illness and isolation. You can return to your half-life, medicated and numb, waiting for death. No one would blame you. The truth I've shown you is heavy, and carrying it will make you an outsider even among outsiders. Or you accept your role as a guardian of forbidden knowledge. You investigate Atlas with new eyes. You find others who are ready to hear what you've learned. You become a node in the awakening network, helping to shift the collective frequency of your species one interaction at a time. You risk being called crazy, being marginalized, perhaps even being silenced by those who fear what you know. That's not really a choice. Xylos's vertical pupils contracted in what might have been a smile. No, for a soul like yours it never was. You were always going to choose truth over comfort. That's why we found each other. The being paused at the threshold of the craft, and for a moment its alien form seemed to shimmer, revealing something else beneath a humanoid figure of pure light, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. One final gift, Xylos said, a frequency attunement that will allow you to maintain contact with higher dimensional beings. You will not see us with your physical eyes, but you will know when we are near. You will feel the guidance when you need it most. And Lucas, when the time comes for you to share what you know, the right people will find you. The universe conspires to support those who serve the evolution of consciousness. The craft began to hum, that bone-deep vibration returning. Xylos raised one hand in farewell, and I found myself mirroring the gesture, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of grief this time, but of overwhelming gratitude and awe. The diamond-shaped vessel rose silently into the night sky, its blue light gradually fading until it was indistinguishable from the stars. I stood there in my backyard for a long time, feeling the cool desert wind on my face, marveling at the fact that I could feel it without pain, that I could stand upright without my joints screaming in protest, that I could think clearly for the first time in years. The truth was revealed. My life would never be the same, and somewhere in the depths of space, a fragment of organic technology called Atlas continued its journey toward Earth, carrying within it the keys to humanity's next evolutionary leap, keys that certain forces would do anything to keep hidden. But they hadn't counted on a broken astrophysics professor from Oregon being chosen as a guardian of forbidden knowledge. They hadn't realized that sometimes the universe heals us not by taking away our pain, but by showing us the meaning within it. I looked up at the stars, at the vast cosmic network of consciousness playing out its infinite drama, and I knew what I had to do. The authorities wanted this truth buried. The parasitic entities wanted humanity kept in darkness. The structures of power wanted us confused and controllable. But I had been touched by something beyond their reach. I had been given a mission by beings who saw humanity's potential when we could barely see past our own suffering. And I had been offered healing in exchange for courage, the courage to speak truth in a world built on comfortable lies. My name is Dr. Lucas Mitchell. I am 47 years old. I am a guardian of interdimensional truth, and this is only the beginning of a revelation that will change everything you thought you knew about who you are, where you came from, and what you're truly capable of becoming. The awakening is coming. The question is, will you be ready when it arrives? If this story resonated with you, if something deep within your soul recognized the truth hidden in these words, then you are part of the Awakening Network. You are ready. Don't let this moment pass. Subscribe to this channel and activate notifications, because what I'm about to share in the coming weeks will shake the foundations of everything you've been taught. The revelations about Atlas are just the beginning. There are more guardians, more encounters, more forbidden truths waiting to be unveiled. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below if you've experienced something similar, a presence, a frequency, a knowing that reality is far more mysterious than we've been told. Your story matters. Your awakening matters. The truth has been revealed. Now it's your choice. Return to sleep or awaken to who you truly are. The universe is watching, and it's waiting for your answer.